All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today we're tackling something that I'm sure a lot of you are feeling, whether you're at the gas pump or the grocery store.
So why is everything so expensive, while it seems like the super rich are just getting richer at a mind-boggling pace? I mean, it's a huge question, right? But it's not just a feeling you have. The numbers tell a pretty shocking story. So yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, just to kick things off, get this. The combined net worth of just four big names in tech, we're talking Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Sundar Pichai, and Elon Musk, is over $700 billion. I mean, think about that. That's a number that was just completely wild to even think about just a decade ago. And this whole thing is speeding up, it's not slowing down. In 2024 alone, total billionaire wealth shot up by an insane $2 trillion. That's growing 3 times faster than the entire global economy. It's just staggering. You hear numbers like trillion and billion, and honestly, they're so big our brains can't really process them. They just become abstract noise. So to really get a handle on the scale we're talking about, let's try a little thought experiment. It'll make it much clearer. Okay, so picture this. Imagine you're earning $1 every single second, nonstop, 24/7, while you sleep, while you eat, $1 a second. So, at that pace, $1 a second, how long would it take to hit $1 million? Just 12 days. That's it. Less than 2 weeks and you're a millionaire. Pretty sweet, right? Okay, but what about a billionaire? How long would that take at the same exact pace, $1 per second? You'd be waiting for over 31 years. So this is the key takeaway here. We're not just talking about being rich. This is a completely different universe of wealth. Right. So the big question is, how does this even happen? How is this possible? Well, it turns out the ultra-wealthy aren't just, working a million times harder. They're basically playing a different game with a totally different set of rules. Let's open up their playbook. So yeah, we all love a good rags to riches story, and they definitely happen. But the data shows that wealth is getting more and more concentrated. If you look at the Forbes data, the most common roads to the billionaire club run through a few key areas: finance and investments, tech, and manufacturing. And a huge chunk of this wealth, almost 18% of it, comes from what economists call monopoly power. You know what I'm talking about? Companies like Google, which owns like 90% of the search market, or Amazon. When one company gets that dominant, they can pretty much squash the competition and set whatever prices they want. And then there's inheritance. This is a big one. In fact, get this. In 2023, for the first time, more new billionaires inherited their money than actually built it from the ground up. And like this quote points out, the real problem is that these massive fortunes get passed down from generation to generation, often with very little, if any, tax. It kind of keeps all that wealth locked inside a very exclusive family circle. But maybe the most powerful trick in the entire playbook is a strategy that's completely legal. It's called buy, borrow, die. And this thing, it just perfectly shows how the rules are different for them. So here's the gist. First, you buy assets, like stocks, that are going to grow in value. Then, instead of selling them and getting hit with a huge capital gains tax bill, you borrow money against them to pay for your lifestyle. And the last step? Die. Yeah, seriously. When the person passes away, their heirs get the assets and they can use those to pay off the loans, often skipping the taxes almost entirely. The legal scholar who actually came up with the name says it's pretty much killed the whole idea of an income tax for the wealthiest people. It's that powerful. So I know what you might be thinking. Okay, that's some clever financial gymnastics, but what does that have to do with me and my grocery bill? Well, it turns out these seemingly abstract strategies have very, very real ripple effects that touch everyone. To really get it, we need to talk about something called the Cantillon effect. It sounds complicated, but it's a really important idea that's actually been around since the 18th century. It basically explains what happens when new money gets pumped into an economy, kind of like what we saw during the pandemic. Okay, so think of it like pouring water on a sponge. The water doesn't hit the whole sponge at once, right? The top gets soaked first. It's the same with new money. When it's created, it doesn't just appear in everyone's bank account. It flows first to those closest to the source. We're talking big banks, financial firms, huge corporations. They get to use that fresh cash to buy up assets like stocks and real estate before all that new money starts causing inflation and driving up prices for the rest of us. By the time it trickles down, it's worth a lot less. So who's in the best position to catch that first wave of new money? Well, take a look at who owns the stock market. The wealthiest 10% of the population owns a whopping 93% of all stocks. 93%! So when the market goes on a bull run, it's pretty clear who's reaping almost all of the rewards. This growing gap isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. Billionaire investor Ray Dalio, who's also a big history buff, he warns that if you look at the last 500 years of history, this exact mix, huge wealth gaps, widespread debt, and a struggling economy, is a recipe for serious social conflict. Okay, so the pressure is definitely building. As more and more people feel that squeeze, the calls for change are getting louder. So what are the actual solutions being talked about? What can be done?
Probably the one you hear about the most is raising the minimum wage. The idea is pretty straightforward. It helps people who are working full-time jobs but are still finding it impossible to make ends meet. But it's a hot debate. Critics worry that small businesses won't be able to afford it, leading to job cuts, or that they'll just pass the cost on to us as higher prices, which just adds to inflation.
Then there are other ideas that try to fix the system itself. Things like closing those big tax loopholes, like the whole buy, borrow, die thing we talked about, or regulating how corporations can buy back their own stock, which can sometimes just artificially inflate the share price. And of course, cracking down on hiding money in offshore tax havens. But of course, there are strong arguments on the other side. For example, the famous economist Milton Friedman made this point. He argued that if you have something like a 100% inheritance tax, you're just giving the wealthy a huge incentive to spend all their money on yachts and luxuries instead of investing it in the things that actually build an economy for the long run, like factories and new businesses. But at the end of the day, the economist Gary Stevenson, who used to be a trader himself, he makes a really critical point. He basically says that none of this can really change unless the general public gets it, unless we all understand why we need to deal with this inequality to protect our own living standards. Because without that massive public demand, any attempt at reform is just going to get crushed by the most powerful and wealthy people in the world who have a lot to lose. And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? The playbook, the mechanics of how this system works, it's all becoming more and more clear. It's not some big secret anymore. It's out in the open for everyone to see. And that leaves us all with a choice about what happens next and what part we want to play in it.